respected Ma'am, Pramini Ma'am, Sraddhalu ji, our esteemed guests, dear colleagues and children, we welcome you all to this edition of Spiritual Retreat, Day 8, Session 1. Speaker for today is Sri Sraddhalu Ranade. It's my honor to introduce him today. Sraddhalu Ranade ji is a scientist, educator, and scholar based at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, India, where he grew up in care of late Sri M.P. Pandit, from whom he received his training in the theory and practice of the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. He has been deeply involved in educational research and teacher training programs for over 20 years and has conducted intensive teacher training workshops in integral education and value-based education all over India and abroad. Over the years, more than 5,000 teachers from over 220 schools and colleges have benefited from these programs. His book, titled Introduction to Integral Education, has been widely acclaimed and is considered compulsory reading in many schools. He specialized in physics, mathematics, and computer sciences, integrating them seamlessly with his philosophical, metaphysical, and spiritual studies. He has been involved in research projects including artificial intelligence based on neural networks, multimedia search and retrieval, image processing and video processing, and assorted simulation tools. He was deeply involved in software research and development for over 25 years, and for about 10 years was engaged in media development, including television programming. He has traveled all over the world in over 30 countries, delivering lectures and conducting workshops on integral education, management by consciousness, esoteric sciences, self-development, the integral yoga, and spiritual practices. He has addressed corporate groups from a wide variety of sectors and has been a speaker at several Rotary International conferences, the United Nations, and various other forums. He believes firmly that the world is transitioning into a new paradigm of living based on a new and spiritual consciousness. We request Shraddhaluji now to speak and enlighten us on the topic spiritual perspective on health and healing. Over to you, sir.
This topic on health and healing from a spiritual perspective is relevant today because it seems to be the biggest concern in the minds of a large part of humanity because of an ongoing situation which seems to have really turned our entire lifestyles upside down. A pandemic, as it is called, where the media is drilling into you every day, numbers of people who are infected, numbers of people who are dying, and a fear is created where it seems as if someone catches the slightest symptom, anything could happen. The reality is quite different though. If you actually look at numbers of people dying per day before pandemic and after pandemic, the total number has not changed. It may sound surprising, but the total number has not changed in the last 10 years. All that has been done by the media has been an exaggeration of numbers and ascribing it entirely to something which seems to cause fear. Numbers of infections also, you'll be surprised to know, almost 97% of those so-called infected with COVID have absolutely no symptoms. In the so-called recent second wave, Bangalore had 99% asymptomatic, meaning they were completely normal people living normal lives. Someone did a test and said, you are COVID infected. If you looked at it logically, you would have simply said, well, your body has developed immunity. Humanity is immune to it pretty much on a 99% level. And there's no reason to fear. But this atmosphere of fear combined with lockdowns, combined with isolations, etc., has somehow clouded, confused our minds, and we have lost perspective. This discussion today is going to go deeper into what it is that makes us healthy, what it is that makes us immune, how a healing takes place in us from a deeper perspective, which unfortunately, your current education does not touch. And again, I will put this in a larger picture. Modern education, as you are all participating in, and I distinguish this from the original Vedic style of education and variations of it, which have been developed across thousands of years in India. The modern education limits your outlook to the universe to only the most dense material layer. That means when you look at the sky, you see a few stars and you're only told about the stars. Oh yes, there are suns, there are so many light years away and so on. What you're not told is that between the stars, there's a humongous life energy and a electromagnetic field and an electric field so enormous, so high in numbers, that if you were to go into it unprotected, it would consume you. In fact, the stars you see are 0.0001% of the reality of what the universe actually is in the sky. Because our vision, our sight is narrow in scope. You know of your 7 colors typically of the rainbow. And of course, there are millions of colors, they're all variations, but 7 primary broad colors and 3 primary colors. But our eyes see only a tiny narrow band of the full range of spectrum of electromagnetic waves, of which the light that we see is a tiny narrow band. If you were to enter the body of a butterfly, you would be able to see far more colors. So flying over to a flower, the human being will say, this flower is red. But the butterfly coming to it will see not only the red, but it will see in the range of ultraviolet colors. It can actually see more colors than your eyes are capable of. A dog has, the design of our eyes has rods and cones. You must have studied this in your biology texts. Well, the cones which see the colors are only of 3 kinds in us: red, green, and blue. And all other colors are made as if by a blending of these 3. Dogs have only 2 kinds of cones. So the blending of colors available to them is far less than to us. But there are animals, which I believe it is the butterfly in this case, has 5 different kinds of cones. So the total blending of colors is far greater. It's at least 100 times more rich than the human experience of colors. But there's one particular sea animal which actually has more than a dozen cones, types of cones. So their actual spectrum of colors is literally millions of times more than the human capacity. And this tells you that actual reality that the universe is something far greater than what you can see, of which a tiny amount is taught to you, and often the most reduced and limited amount. So what you learn in your biology is about your body, which is all that you know about. When you say me, you mean your body, isn't it? And then you've been taught you have bones, you have muscles, you have tissue, you have nerve cells and variations of other cells, and maybe special functions as in the brain or in the stomach. But what you are not taught about is that this physical body is in fact 100th of the totality that is your body. And I'm going to be exploring a little bit of this so that you understand your health is not determined only by the physical body, but by the rest of the 99% which you do not see directly, but which you can feel, but which you're not taught about. And that 99% is far more powerful than this 1%. And we will touch upon a few examples also of how you can tap into that 99% to make yourself not only healthy, not only resilient, but also to heal injuries or illnesses, not only in yourself, but even in others. Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a journey where as we go along, perhaps I will ask you a few questions. I will ask you to do some experiments. And through the interaction, we'll see how far we can go, because 99% is a lot, right? So we may not complete everything in this interaction, but I'll try to touch upon the most important ideas. So the first most significant idea, which comes from our yoga tradition and the experience of the Indian civilization going back 10,000 years at least, okay? That goes back to the Vedic civilization itself, which is the foundation for everything that India has developed. We realize that we have not just one physical body, but they speak in the Veda of 5 bodies. In fact, of 7 gradations of different kinds of substance, of which the physical is only one grade. Even within the physical grade, they speak of 7 sub-gradations, and within each of those, there are further 7 sub-gradations. So the total number of actual gradations of material is huge, 49 into 7. But the bulk of that is not beyond our is beyond our reach of direct experience. The range which is within our reach is of 3 bodies. And I will use the English terms here, but also touch on the Sanskrit terms. The physical body, which is what you are touching, seeing, and are learning about in your studies. They call it the Annamaya. You know what is Annam? In Sanskrit, food. So Annamaya is the food body. What does that mean? In fact, the whole material world is called Annam. Why is that? Because the nature of matter is everything is eating something else while being eaten by something else. Think about what that means. So let's say you are eating food and the food may be coming from a plant. So you are eating the plant, but within you, there are bacteria which are eating you up, isn't it? Or if you look at the food chain in the forest, the little rabbit might come and nibble on the plant, but the rabbit itself might be eaten by a larger animal, which might be in turn eaten by a larger animal, which eventually is eaten by the smallest creatures, which are the bacteria which decompose the body, isn't it? So there's a food cycle. Everything is eating while itself being eaten. And that's the only way life continues in the physical world. So the character of the physical world is Annam, food. We are food for ourselves, for food. So the name of the world, this domain is given Annam. That's the reason for it. There's a profound psychology and science, even in the vocabularies used in the Veda. The next gradation is the Pranamaya, the vital body. Prana is life force, which actually enlivens everything. Now your body, if you withdrew the life energy, your body would just go limp. It would not be very different from stone. Think about it. What is your body tissue made of? The food that you ate, which is made of what? So even if you're a non-vegetarian, eventually that creature you eat has eaten plants. So your body finally is made up of plant tissue, which has been absorbed and digested and converted into your cells, isn't it? So your body is made of plant tissue. Think about it. Very interesting idea. But reconstructed, restructured. But what is the plant tissue made of? So where does the plant draw all its substance? From the roots. It takes material and water. But what is the material that it takes along with the water? Soil, sand, isn't it? Or even if it takes something from the microbiome, it is the tiny bacteria which have eaten the soil to produce material that the plant can absorb. Organic material. So finally, the plant is absorbing from soil, which we normally call what? Dead matter. Except it's not dead. It's just not very expressive, or it's not capable of expressing. There are experiences one can have where you can experience a mountain as being conscious. And the mountain can communicate with you. It can greet you. It can say, yes, you're welcome. Here are my secrets, and it can reveal what it knows or what it has within it. And there are experiences people have had in this way. You can also have them, by the way, it's not difficult. But you have had similar experiences when you enter a certain space, especially in nature, which is quite pristine. You suddenly feel as if the whole space is conscious, as if you're being watched. And sometimes you feel welcomed, sometimes you don't feel welcomed. And if you've had this experience, you know what it's like. But you can actually communicate with those spaces and with those objects. Even a stone, if you pick it up and hold it in your hand, you may have had this experience. Sometimes you feel as if the stone wants to go back home with you. If you go on an outing, for some reason, your eye falls on a stone and you pick it up, and you don't want to let it go. You want to bring it home. You've had that experience? Interesting, isn't it? It's as if the stone is communicating, but it does not have organs like the tongue to be able to speak. So it communicates directly in the life energy impression. If you have had pets at home, you will have a similar experience that your dog looks at you and you know that the dog is unhappy, or it is happy, or it is hungry, or it wants to communicate something. And it can only bark because it cannot speak. It does not have the complexity of the human skill of speaking. But it's communicating directly in the emotion and in the thought. And you can get similar communications with plants. The mother describes how, when she was in Japan, it was springtime, and she walked into the garden, and there were plants which were telling her, take me, I'm ready. Another plant said, no, not yet. I'm not yet ready to be taken. So this was in the vegetable garden. And then there were the plants which were of the season of spring, and those plants revealed to her their medicinal secrets of how they could be used to heal. It is in this way that our knowledge of Ayurveda was developed, by the plants revealing their capacity to the masters. You see, modern sociology or scientists will tell you things like, over thousands of years, people observed certain plants, experimented, and then found that, oh, this plant works like this. It doesn't work like that. You cannot gather knowledge over thousands of years with a random experimentation. In fact, we have such complex formulae. Triphala, you may have heard the term triphala. It is a mixture of three fruits or three materials, plants. The combination of triphala has the capacity to cure cancer. And this is confirmed by modern studies. But if you take out any one of them or change their proportion, then its effect in curing cancer is lost. Now, there is no way somebody over centuries will try out different combinations until he finds a combination of three things in just the right proportion which produces that result. True knowledge does not come like that. True knowledge is actually the plant revealing its own power to you directly, showing you what is to be done, how to use it, how to prepare it to be able to achieve that result. Or it comes from a still higher domain, which is above the mind. We'll touch upon this also later for healing. So the knowledge comes from there, or can be transmitted by the plant in its living capacity, or by the stone also. So I'm coming back to the original concept. The plant is nothing but stone molecules taken up, reconstituted to become living plant tissue, which then you eat, to absorb, reconstitute to become conscious living human tissue. But ultimately your body is made of what? Stone. Isn't it? Stone which has been reconstituted, molecularly rearranged. Think about what that means. What makes your body living then? There's nothing in matter which by itself could make you living. There has to be a greater power, that's what we call life force prana, which enters into this stone material, rearranges it, and makes it a vehicle to express the power of prana. But when you can see a flower, when it fades out, it just shrinks. Entire biological constitution is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. You take a flower, put it in a sealed envelope. When it fades out, it's still molecularly the same, isn't it? What has changed? The prana withdrew. Prana entering would make the flower again bright and fresh. And this is something you can actually experiment with. You take a flower which is fading, take it in your hand and just pour love into it. Pour a fresh energy, affection, and love, and you'll find the flower, it begins to bloom once again. Or you take a flower, or two flowers, put them in two separate vases. One of them you neglect completely. The other you put a lot of love and affection and energy. And you'll find this one stays fresh longer than the other. Interesting. And that shows you, and it is physical evidence, that the prana is not only independent of the annamaya, the physical, but it can come in, it can withdraw, and it can change how it functions. So your biology is alive because of prana body, not gross physical, not physical body. It is prana entering physical body which makes it living. Prana withdrawing would make it stone, isn't it? Dust. What makes prana enter? What makes prana flow and function in specific ways? What makes it intensify in the flow? You see, in the martial arts traditions, you are taught to master prana first. If you have not mastered prana, you cannot do the mastery of martial arts. Because when the martial arts master breaks a brick with the blow of the hand, sometimes even a cement brick or a stone, the impact is so great that your bone should break because your bone is more fragile than the brick. Isn't it? So the training actually is to hit not with the hand and bone, but with the prana energy, which hits the brick before the bone touches and begins to break it. Or the prana energy in the body can make it strong enough to override its biological weakness. There's a very interesting example which is documented by a early European explorer in Japan entering this domain of martial arts. And most of the masters don't reveal their secrets or their capacities. As in India, we have the whole body of knowledge of Kalaripayat, which is still hidden. 99% is still hidden. So this man goes to the master swordsman, and the master says, I will show you something. He takes his sword, and the sword is so sharp that he takes a piece of wood, presses on it, and it cuts through like butter. Then he concentrates on his arm until after about 10 minutes, he says, okay, now ready, you can hit the sword. And he takes the sword and whacks the arm. The same sword which cut through the wood like butter now bounces off his hand. And then again, he concentrates and withdraws what he just did. And now his hand is as fragile as anybody else. It could get cut. What did he do? Whatever he did was not purely biological, because biologically nothing changed. It was purely on the level of prana. Prana entering the biology can actually change the properties of material. Isn't that what your body is actually doing? It is stone, but with different properties. The capacity of prana is to completely recast the properties of matter that it enters. And there are many amazing things it can do. When we meet the next time, whenever that happens, I will actually demonstrate to you this capacity. I will call one of you on stage and show you how in a short concentration of a single minute, you can make your arm at least 2 or 3 times stronger. Your muscles can become 3 times stronger, just like that, by a concentration and visualization. Okay, so this is just to show you it's not difficult. Prana is fluid. What drives the prana, what guides it is. And now we come to the third level, mana, mind, the mental body. Your mind, your awareness, and the intention and will of your awareness guides the prana flow. So I'm going to ask you to make a simple experiment now. I want you to place your right hand in front of you and the center of the palm. I want you to concentrate on the center. If you like, you can touch briefly the center, but then stop touching and just hold your palm and feel that center. Feel the sensations there. Concentrate with full attention and let it grow. Let it grow. There's a sensation you're feeling. Let it grow in sensation. It becomes as if warmer. It becomes tingly. Perhaps it becomes hot, or it feels as if something is pulsating, or you may feel like some part rising, sensation rising or penetrating. Just let it grow in intensity and intensify it now. Did you feel something? What happened there? If you could measure right now with one of those electronic thermometers, you would feel that you'll find the temperature that has risen. The temperature has risen by at least half a degree, depending on your concentration and how long you hold it. What we did just now was barely 15 seconds, less than a half a minute. Okay. and already you had the sensation, perhaps you still feel something warm there. Compared with the other hand, you can feel the difference. Yes, so someone commented that right palm is warmer than the left one. So Swami Rama was tested in the laboratory setting by the Menninger Foundation in the US. And this is going back 30, 40 years when they were still exploring whether this is true. Sitting in the laboratory, he's concentrating on his hand. Okay, first what he did was he slowed down his heartbeat at will, speeded up his heartbeat at will, or slowed it down to such a point that it was barely beating 1 beat per minute. Now, if somebody was in that state of 1 beat per minute, you could say the person is dead, perhaps, because you feel you have no pulse. Unless your pulse is above 50, your machines will not even register it. Pulse of one beat per minute, practically nothing. And he is conscious, well alive, and conversing while holding a pulse of 1 beat per minute. How? By mind controlling prana, controlling biology. Then what he did, he concentrated on the hand, made one part of the hand warm, the way you did, but much warmer. It went up 2 or 3 degrees in heat. And at the same time, on another part of the hand surface, he made it cooler. The skill involved of the control of prana is the gift of Hatha Yoga practices. But behind those practices is the direction of the mind and the intention, which is guiding the prana. So what you did just now, concentrating on the hand, was to intensify the flow of prana there, which with a little bit of skill, you can actually redirect. So for example, you could place that palm on a part of your body and intensify that warmth and direct the prana into that part. This is the basis of certain kinds of healing. So if ever you have an injury, you notice what you do instinctively, you put your palm on the injured part, isn't it? Instinctively. Why? It feels better. In fact, it feels better because there's actually a flow of prana from the palms into that part. If you could consciously intensify this flow, you could accelerate the healing enormously. And there are experiments done in the laboratory. And this is one of those I'm referring to, is an experiment done barely 2 years ago, where cells were cultured in a petri dish. Normal cell growth is taking place. You have a control petri dish, and then you have this experimental petri dish. Somebody directs prana without touching. Simply being in that space, looking at it, or from the hand at a distance, directs prana. And see, prana is not bound to physical matter. It can flow anywhere. It can flow through walls. It can flow at a great distance. So from a distance of 10 centimeters, you hold your palm and you direct prana, and immediately the growth begins in the cells. So one of these healers, who was a master healer, he was to come for the experiments, and then he suddenly wrote back saying, sorry, I am traveling and I'm unable to come to India for this experiment. So he was in some other country. And he said, but I will still do the experiment with you over a Skype call. So what he did, they connected on the internet. There's a video of him. And on the other side, there's a laptop in front of which they put the petri dish. Now see how ridiculous it seems from a purely physical point of view. That fellow sitting somewhere, and a picture of him is being transmitted, bounced across satellites, going through fiber optic cables as a data stream, which comes to your laptop, which recreates a picture of him on the screen. On a purely physical level, it's just illusory image. And similarly, your picture of petri dish is being transmitted to him. But as he concentrates, within a minute, in the petri dish, the cells began to grow. And a dramatic growth. Within 2 minutes, in fact. Within 2 minutes, these were nerve cells. They began to grow and form neural connections. I'm going to pause on this because it has such massive implications for you personally. You see, you are at an age when your brain is still growing in nerve cells. Around the age of 21, a large part of this growth stops. And the brain begins to reduce connections between cells. It's as if initially it's growing rapidly to make for full plasticity of growth and possibilities. And then once it says, okay, now I'm pretty much where I want to be, it starts removing what is unnecessary. And there's a reduction in cells as well as in interconnections between cells. That's why this age at which you are is so important. Use this time well to develop as many capacities and skills as you can, learn as much as you can, because afterwards it's not so easy to learn. You may see that perhaps in your parents or grandparents, very difficult for them to learn a new skill. But it can change. And this is why this experiment is so important. Here are normal nerve cells. On the push of the prana, they begin to grow connections rapidly and multiply. From somebody sending the prana at a distance, imagine through a Skype call. In other words, prana is not bound to physical limits of space or even time. This prana directed to you when you're not well. You've had this experience perhaps. Mom comes and gives you a hug and you feel good, isn't it? The love from her heart is surrounding and filling you with the prana which heals you. But you will also notice that your parents are thinking about you. Suppose they are away from you for a while, or you are away, you're going to school, they're thinking about you. That thought directed also is directing prana. Their love and affection and caring for you is giving you nourishment directly, although unconsciously. It has massive implications. And so when you give with love and affection to a plant, to an animal, to another human being, you're also directing prana. But again, you've not developed the skill. The skill created, you can do something so dramatic as to increase the number of brain cells. Now, who is the greatest redirector of prana? You yourself for your own body, isn't it? Because it's your prana feeding your body. If you directed your own prana, you could trigger in your brain a growth of brain cells and nerve connections. In other words, intensify your power of intelligence. By what? Redirecting prana. By what? By direction of your mind. So your manomaya kosha, okay, we have not spoken of this term. Kosha is the sheath or body. So manomaya, mental body, controls pranamaya, vital body, which controls the biology, annamaya. Now this is in terms of actual power to influence, the prana is 10 times more than the annamaya at least. Manomaya is 10 times more than the pranamaya, 100-fold straight away. And then beyond the mind, there are other levels, which I will touch upon later, where the power to shape the mind exists or to even override the mind. And that we will generally broadly describe as the spiritual or in the Vedic tradition, we will use the word adhyatma, adhi atma, of the nature of Atman. Adhyatmic will be broadly the term used for the domains above mind, and there are many domains beyond, of which we have no idea, but which are conscious in their own way and which influence your thinking. In fact, you have had an experience, sometimes a bright idea flashes. You didn't think it out, it just came into you, right? From where did it come? From those higher domains. What is interesting is those domains are conscious of you, even if you are not conscious of them. So if you watch an ant moving around looking for food, you can tell the ant, hey, the food is in that direction, go there. Ant cannot understand, maybe cannot hear, right? But you can watch it, and then you can put your finger and nudge the ant to go in that direction. Well, it's something like that from these higher realms to your mind. You're struggling to find an answer, and in the higher realms, the higher knowledge says, here, this is the answer. You can't hear because you're dumb, you're deaf, you're blind to the higher knowledge. Why? Because you didn't develop it. You were too fixated on your physical senses and did not turn to develop your higher faculties. So it's as if you are blind and deaf to the knowledge coming from above, but it can, as if, push a suggestion in, and that pops up into your consciousness just like that. You don't know from where, and you say, I have an idea. And that's the reason why often when you can't solve a problem, you've spent the whole evening struggling over it. You give up, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning and you find a solution quickly. Why? Because during the sleep, that higher knowledge could reach inside your mind, which was not too preoccupied, which was more relaxed and could receive easily. Isn't it? And then that pops up into your surface thinking power after you wake up. You could consciously develop this capacity. How? The method is very simple. I will only summarize it, but when you experiment, you will find it's not difficult. You think about the problem, struggle over it. You do what you have to do to try to solve it. You can't find a solution. Now you stop. Having done everything you could do, you stop and make your mind completely quiet, if possible, even entirely silent. Then you turn your mind upward, feeling the space above, towards those higher things of which you are not directly conscious, but they are conscious. They are trying to give you the knowledge, those layers. And you wait. And if you can maintain that stillness or silence, you'll find very gently, like a drop of rain coming from above, plop, something comes as an idea. I got it. You see? But you say, I got it. No, I received it from that. Later, and this is part of the yoga knowledge, you can develop the capacity to rise into that domain and have access to the full knowledge which is there, which is your knowledge, by the way. And this includes even all the knowledge of your past lives and all the knowledge of the present universe. So if you can enter that domain of knowledge, you have actually access to anything you wish to know. And this is part of the human potential. This should be part of our education one day eventually. But for now, it will be part of your education, at least a preparation now in understanding. And perhaps later in life, if you decide to pursue it, you'll develop this capacity also. All success in life eventually is the result of access to this, what I will now use the word intuitional knowledge. Adhyatmic is a general term which covers all those different domains, but the immediate level just above your intellect, Sri Aurobindo calls the intuitive mind. From there comes all access to all knowledge. And this is actually described in the Vedas, in the Upanishads. The methods are taught to develop this. So someday when you decide that this is important for you, study those methods, put them into practice, and you will have access to this. Sri Aurobindo, of course, richly and in detail describes the exact practices necessary to develop this capacity and to begin to live in the intuitive mind, which I cannot go into today. We don't have enough time and our focus is different. Okay. So all this is to tell you that we are not just this biology. We are much more, far more pranamaya, manomaya, and adhyatmic. All of those have greater power over the biology than the biology has over itself. Now, having understood this, there are immediate implications, one of which is when you fall sick, the actual cause of illness may be biological, but it may also be on those other levels. I'm going to give an example here. Let's say you have a fear of some animal, let's say snakes. Some people have fear of snakes. For whatever reason, you have a fear of snakes, let's say, and I hope you shouldn't have, but still. So we have a natural fear. And as you come into, as you're walking to a particular place, let's say you're entering a classroom or you're going to some place, there's a picture of a snake, maybe a beautiful snake. You look at it and you say, I'm scared. Where do you feel fear? This is an interesting experiment you can do also. Where do you feel fear in your body? Most people, you will feel it in the abdomen, isn't it? Okay, we'll try this experiment. I'll ask you to express by gesture. How will you indicate I? You're doing a mime on stage. By gesture, you want to say I. How will you do that? Can you show me by gesture? So normally you will find when you say I in stage, you will put your hand to the chest, I, right? But notice when you're thinking, where are you centered? Where is the thought taking place? You don't say I'm thinking. You say here, somewhere in the center of the forehead, right? But you don't say I. You say I. You put your hand on your head when you have a problem. Oh, I have a problem. I have a headache. But when you say I, your identity is here. Interesting. There are two different eyes. There's a thinking eye and there's a awareness or feeling or a more essential eye, which is in the chest center. But there's a third eye. When you're on the top of a tall building and you look down and you experience the fear of height, where do you feel it? In your abdomen. It's as if something in your abdomen constricts and pulls you back, right? So what happens here? In the abdomen is the center of the physical eye. In the heart is the center of the emotional eye. In the head is the center of the mental eye. Okay. And above head is the center of the intuitive eye, the source of the higher knowledge. Interesting. You have multiple centers. This knowledge actually is extended far more deep. We speak of 7 centers in the body, and in fact, 12 centers in all, which are even outside the physical body. You've heard of this term used, chakra? 7 chakras are the centers which are in the body. In fact, the 7th is just above the head outside, but in your subtle body. Now, all this is to tell you that you have multiple focal points of different grades of awareness and different functions on those grades. And all of these are working simultaneously in a complex operation, of which your physical biology is just one tiny layer. But I was coming to something else as an experiment, as the example. You remember I said when you look at the picture of the snake, you feel fear. Where does it hit you? In the abdomen. What you experience is a shrinking. Now, let's say every day as you entered that room, you saw the snake, you experienced a shrinking in the abdomen, and then you went on to some other work. The shrinking didn't stop. It stayed tight. And if it starts happening every day, what happens after a while? The muscles in your abdomen begin to constrict. What happens after that? Your digestion is affected because the stomach cannot freely flow. Your digestion affected, your movement of the intestines is affected because the muscles are tense. They are not pushing the material easily. So your body is not able to throw out waste matter easily. Very quickly, it can snowball into a problem of either malnutrition because digestion was not good enough, or infection of material which was not cleaned out, which had to be thrown out from the body, but which is now festering and triggering infections from inside the intestines, or simply a habit of fear. For no reason at all, every time I enter a new space, I experience a fear, and I don't know why. Now, all these are variations in which that same small instinctive shrinking could take in different directions in different people. Now, notice the actual cause of all these problems, including the biological problem and the malnutrition, is in that instinctive fear which made your muscles shrink. But the fear itself is not in the muscles, it is in your emotions, it is in the pranic body, or in the mental body even. Because in the mind, somebody told you snakes are scary, dangerous. And now you have acquired that as a habit in the prana, which becomes a habit in the physical body, which becomes an illness. Can you imagine how many of your problems are actually rooted in your psychology? You'll be surprised. We can even say something like 90% of problems have their roots in the psychology, including extreme problems such as extreme illnesses, of which people have died, but the root would have been in the psychology. And then it becomes chronic. You've heard the term illness has become chronic, which means what? It has become a habit in the body. Now the body does it by habit. The habit of the muscles in the stomach to stay constricted all the time. What do? You can't. Oh, there is a way you can. If you start practicing asanas, you stretch those muscles and teach them to relax. And suddenly you realize your digestion problem is gone. Your health has improved. And your fear instinct is now weaker. So a change in the biology can trigger a ripple effect in the psychological layers, in the pranic or the mental body. Equally, a change in the mental pranic body can trigger all the way down because these layers are all deeply interconnected. Now we have a very important understanding. Illness can originate on any of these levels. Equally, cure can be triggered on any of these levels. And then I will go so far as to say, if you want a complete cure, trigger it on all the levels. I'll show you one more, which is even more profound. The adhyatmic, the above mind ranges, also can trigger illnesses if something is wrong there. And I'll give an example here. And again, it's very important for you because it can be for you the source of nourishment for the rest of your life if you understand what this means. I'll give an example of a person who was a highly creative person, wanted to express that creativity in various ways, very idealistic. But for some reason, because of pressure of parents forcing him to get into a particular stream of career and a particular kind of life, that potential was never allowed to be expressed. The result was, although the person did all those activities, something inside felt deeply sad. As if that's not what I came to do. I wish I could do more. I want to do so much more, but I cannot. And I feel trapped. Increasingly, the person began to feel as if his life was a prison and jail. What happens when you feel imprisoned? You shrink, you close. So emotionally, the person begins to close. Biologically, the life energies lose enthusiasm, they weaken. You see the difference? When you're sad and unhappy, your body slouches. Your entire metabolism, all the biological processes slow down and become weaker. Why? Because the pranamaya has withdrawn enthusiasm. Now let's reverse it. You're sad, unhappy, depressed. And then perhaps your best friend comes and says, hey, let's go and have some fun activity, whatever that is. Immediately your energies rise, enthusiasm comes back, fills. And I thought I was tired. Now suddenly I have lots of energy to do what I want to do. Isn't it? What was the difference? Your pranamaya again filled in once again the vessel of your body and mind. And everything suddenly began to act. You're feeling sleepy. Somebody calls and gives you great news. Immediately you wake up and are full of enthusiasm, isn't it? What was the difference? The prana flowed into your mental body and in physical body. Just before sleep, it begins to withdraw to produce that state of rest. If you could dynamically fill or withdraw or modify, imagine the mastery you could have. You could go to sleep at will, you could wake up at will, you could make yourself as fresh and as energetic as you want, when you want, and take time to rest whenever you need to. That's the kind of skill you can actually develop. And this is one of the results of the whole practice of asanas, pranayam, if properly done in this way with this intention. It gives you that skill. But all this, I'm coming to a very important point here. That something in the higher misaligned with the life made the person withdraw energy, begin to feel as if trapped, and eventually his whole life became, or his health began to decline, weaken, got some strange illnesses, the type which the person somehow doesn't have enough energy through the life, and one of the very different forms in which it can appear. One of them is called fibromyalgia. If you look up the word, they will say, oh, we don't know why it happens, but these are the symptoms. Low energy, inability to function, many of the biological functions become weak. Why? We don't know. Why we don't know? Because it's not a biological disease. The root cause is not only psychological, but perhaps even higher in an adhyatmic, spiritual sense. The sense of life purpose misaligned with the life you're leading can lead to this withdrawal of enthusiasm, energy. Now think of what that means for you. When you follow your life's purpose or your deepest aspiration of your soul, whatever it may be in terms of form, and sometimes it can express through many forms, you will find your energy is flowing, your enthusiasm flowing, your capacity and skill growing. But if you turn away from that and say, I am going to chase some fanciful idea, I want to make a lot of money, for what? I don't know, but that's what people say I should do. But maybe your heart is drawing you to something still different. You may chase that, you may become successful in appearance, but inside you will be unhappy. Isn't it? And with it, you will find loss of enthusiasm, loss of skill and capacity gradually creeping in. Why is this important? Sri Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita that your Swadharma, the purpose for which you were born, is the line which gives you the greatest fulfillment. Your Swadharma is unique to you. If you go against your Swadharma, then you lose this enthusiasm. But if you go against your Swadharma, what happens is you may appear to be successful to others, but within you, you will feel yourself a failure. So he says something quite extraordinary. He says, it is better to fail while following your Swadharma than to succeed while following somebody else's Swadharma. Why? Because that success is not your success. It is a pretentious appearance. Whereas this failure seeming is not a failure. It is your fulfillment of growth that you chose. And perhaps you chose a line of development where I'm going to achieve or go through the most difficult challenges of life. And although I overcome one challenge after another, and it gives me great enthusiasm to do that, people will say, oh, you don't have a comfortable life. You're not successful. And I'll give the example here of a mountain climber. A mountain climber, let's say, who set the challenge to climb the Mount Everest because it is the highest mountain, at each step of the journey is experiencing pain in the muscles, hypothermia, hunger, and all kinds of discomforts, perhaps falling, scratching, breaking a few parts of the body. But he grows in enthusiasm as he approaches his goal. And on reaching the goal says, I am fulfilled. I have achieved what I came to do. The pain or the discomforts were meant to be overcome. And the achievement of that life was overcoming them precisely. And that gave him the greatest enthusiasm. Think about it. Somebody else may choose a very different line of life where the purpose is to grow in knowledge. And the temperament may be completely different. I may be very sensitive to certain foods, to certain physical discomforts. I like to be in my little library room reading my books, and I'm not an outdoors person at all. But this gives me the deep satisfaction that I seek. So to the adventurer, they will say, oh, you have a wasted life. Whereas the man who has grown in extraordinary knowledge will say, adventurer, you are wasting your life by not experiencing this growth of awareness and knowledge. But actually both have fulfilled their line of Swadharma. That's why fulfill your Swadharma, not another's. And I'm showing you how even that misalignment from your soul's purpose and the life forms of your body can cause an illness. And these things do exist, in fact. Many illnesses of this kind come from a spiritual misalignment. So all this is to show you the cause of illness can be on any of these levels, a misalignment, a disharmony, and the key word we will use now everywhere is loss of harmony. Wherever things are not in alignment, misaligned is illness. So we'll use the Sanskrit word again, swasthya. What's the word for good health? Swasthya, well-being is how we would translate. What is swa? Well-being, swasthya. What is well? When being is aligned. What is unwell? When being is misaligned, in conflict, loss of harmony. All problems of life, Sri Aurobindo says, are essentially problems of harmony. Bring back the harmony, problem gone. Allow disharmony, problem appears. And this is the truth also of your ill health. Any disharmony between these parts would produce imbalance, eventually ill health, or within each of these parts also. You see, in your disharmony in working of your liver and your stomach would produce problems in digestion, which would trigger other problems eventually, right? So you have internal harmony between different parts of one body. Within parts or functions of a single part, in the stomach, there are multiple functions. Each of those must work in harmony, isn't it? And then across layers, there has to be harmony, all the way to the highest or deepest of your identity. That is perfect health, well-being, swasthya. Disharmony is ill health. It may be superficial, it may be short-term, or it may grow eventually to become chronic and long-term. Now think about this. Every time you have an illness, try to observe in yourself what is misaligned and try to correct. Sometimes it could be psychological, sometimes it could be biological. I have been eating a lot of junk food for the last 10 days, and suddenly I feel a little pukey and my digestion is going haywire. My sleep is affected. My capacity to think has become dull. Chain reaction. Observe, correct. But for that, the first step is start observing. Not only biology, but psychology and your deeper ranges. Observe everything carefully within you. And you will begin to notice very quickly. So remember I said the problem with the inability to access higher knowledge is that we are too focused on the outside. We don't turn in to look within. So the moment you start observing within yourself, you turn your sight inward, you will notice far more. And you'll notice something extraordinary. The world within you is in fact as rich or even more rich than the world outside you. And by making corrections here, you can change everything in your outside. In fact, you'll notice something interesting, and I'll give an example of how this works. You have a problem with a friend or with a teacher. For some reason, that ma'am doesn't like me. Every time I come into class, she looks at me and frowns. Or I do my best, but she still says you're not good enough. Or she's biased. She likes that person. She doesn't like me. Okay? Maybe that's your experience. Maybe there's a basis to it also. Maybe she looks at you and she feels, oh, I don't feel comfortable with this person. Why? And now you look inside yourself. You may realize that you had a discomfort with her. Maybe it had something to do with an experience or a story you heard before you came into class or met her the first time. Someone biased you, or it may be simply for an unknown reason, a misalignment of energy. You have some shrinking, which then reflects in her consciousness as a discomfort, which then reflects unconsciously in her behavior. Perhaps. You realize the root cause finally is the shrinking which was within you. Can you correct it? If you can now consciously shift, shape your energy, your heart, your love, and turn to her and blow out affection unconditionally. I don't know. I should not be biased. I should not allow these wrong ideas to come in. You too are a conscious, evolving soul in evolution, as I am. And we are all here together, equally children of the Divine Mother. And so I open my heart and I give you my love and my support and affection. Do this. And I assure you, in the very first day that you do it, you'll feel a shift. And if you do it for a few days, suddenly you'll find that behavior will shift from her side and she'll become extremely affectionate to you. Interesting. I've actually had a friend, I had advised him to do this, where he was going to a government office for a clearance for his business and he was not getting it. And the man was so rude to him, so nasty, kept making him wait and refused to clear. And I said to my friend, what do you feel when you meet him? He says, I feel anger, I feel hatred, I feel upset. I said, well, what you're doing is you're throwing those energies at him. What do you think he will feel? So I said to my friend, you must, and pretense will not work. You must genuinely feel love for him. Think of what a struggle he has to have. He has to meet so many people every day. He gets fed up with all the burden of responsibilities. Perhaps he has huge problems at home with his family, or he is unable to meet certain expectations of his family with the work he has. You feel compassion, you feel love for him, genuinely, because you can't pretend. What is transmitted is what is transmitted. So I told my friend, you go to his office, tell him, I'm sorry, I have to sit here, I have to wait for my clearance, but I know you're busy, I don't want to disturb you, I'll just sit here. And I said, you sit there and radiate love. Well, a few days down, that man called him and said, okay, what do you really want? My friend explained the problem and he gave it, he granted the whole clearance. And after that, they became the best of friends, interestingly. It was a magical transformation of a relationship because you changed what was within you. And again, I'm pointing this out. This also is a sickness. It's a social sickness, social ill health, isn't it? When we share hatred or dislike for each other. It's a misalignment of harmony in our social body, which is our family or our larger society. That too can be healed in this way. But all these possibilities begin to open up when you turn inward and begin to observe and notice the relationship, the correlation between the outer and the inner, and you find changing things within you has a massive ripple effect outward. Most importantly, you can heal internally illnesses, and actually dramatically. So I will now close with this because we are running out of time, and I want to have a few questions from you. I'll close with this one idea. First, illness can have a base in the biology because there's a damage. Let's say there's a cut and the cut needs to heal. Well, cells have to grow. There's no other way. But the growth of the cells is regulated by life force. So you will first clean the wound, do what is necessary biologically, clean it, join the wound, bind it so that the tissue remains joined, but that's not enough to heal. Prana has to flow and guide the cells in their growth. So next step after doing the physical correction, you will bring the pranic energy. Perhaps place your palm over the wound and put an intention there. That brings in the mind. The intention will be to heal it. Your mind, sustained will, directing the prana energy into that part with harmony, with love. Remember, it cannot be, oh, again, I've got a, oh, when will this get healed? What you're putting is chaotic energy. You have to reverse that, put loving, soothing, harmonious energy. Okay. Now, this has another massive implication. The more you live in a state of harmony, love, positivity, optimism, the more within you things are in harmony and the less you fall ill. The more you are full of emotions of distress, conflict, tension, anger, hatred, negativity, the more likely you will fall ill because things within you will tend to fall out of sync more easily. Okay? So this is a general state that you must cultivate, but also you can direct that quality of energy to a specific part when there's an injury. And the mind equally must have a state of harmony, alignment, goodwill, good intention, sustained will. And finally, above that, in the Adhyatmik, which is the ultimate source of harmony, but also of all power and energy and knowledge, you have the power to rapidly act through all these layers and even to produce a physical result in a very short time. And I will give you a few examples. There was a person in the ashram who had a major bone fracture. The thigh bone had been broken and he had to be taken to Chennai. In those days, we didn't have hospitals which could manage it in Pondicherry. So they were taken in, to Chennai, and the doctors there had put the hard plaster and all, came back to Pondicherry. And at that time, the mother said, all right, you're on a wheelchair. She asked for the wheelchair to be brought while she was playing tennis in the tennis court of the ashram, and for the wheelchair to be taken around the tennis court while she was playing. Now you have to understand the deeper sense of it. When she was playing tennis, she was embodying the spiritual force and directing it on a very material level. But it was also a point where that person being in that space, she could direct that energy most intensely for the healing. Now, a week down, the person had to go back to Chennai for replacing of the plaster. The doctors opened the plaster and said, this is impossible. The healing that has taken place is the equivalent of several months. There is no way it could have happened. What did you do? The person said, nothing. I just followed your instruction. They said, it's not possible. We have never seen such a rapid healing. So then, of course, it was revealed that he was coming to the ashram, and this was the mother's action on his body. So the doctors actually came down to see who is this mother who is doing this miraculous healing. But we have had other cases, even more dramatic. There was a person who was about to die, and the doctors had given up all hope. He was practically now going to die, and he asked to see the mother one last time. So the mother came to him, and then he said, Mother, I have only one wish. Place your feet on my chest. So mother said, all right. She put her foot there. And then after a while, she went away. In a few hours, the person recovered. In a few days, he was completely normal and went on with his life. For the rest of his life, he said, I wish I'd asked mother to put both her feet on my chest. What happened? So it's not the act of putting the feet. She could have said, okay, I'm going to heal you, let me put my feet. No. She needn't have put her feet. Remember, the energy can go directly, especially the spiritual energy. It doesn't need distance even. It doesn't care for distance. What was necessary here was the person opening himself to the help. This is a very important principle. The mother explained that the help is always there with you. Where is the divine? Not somewhere above the sky. Right here, right now, in everything. The very substance of reality is the divine presence, isn't it? Where is the divine? Here, in you. The problem is you are closed to that influence. Remember, the knowledge above cannot reach your mind because you're too busy looking down, not turning up. So to the spiritual help is there all the time, and it has the power to override all of these biological limitations, but you're unable to open or receive it. So the difference which made this man get cured miraculously was the fact that he opened with trust, saying, give me, help me, I want to receive. And he held with love. The same thing if he had been told, oh, you know what, there's somebody here who's a miracle maker, let her put her foot on your chest and it'll happen. And the guy says, nah, it cannot happen. No way. Okay, let me try. You wouldn't have got the result. You see, the spontaneous, total opening of the being to receive, to call and to receive the help and to hold is the key. I'll give another example. If you take a flower which is fading and you stick it in water, what will happen? If it absorbs the water, then it will recover its full bloom. If it does not absorb the water and says, I don't think that water can help me, and refuses to take in the water, well, the flower will remain what it is. So the key is not the help that comes from there. The key is your call and your ability to open and your ability to receive. Three things: call, open, receive. And then fourth will be hold, contain. That produces a miraculous outcome. And the fact is the divine help is always there. And that's why we have these occasional miraculous results where somebody does a prayer and there's a miraculous result the very next day. And I'll end with one example of this. These are medically documented cases. There are about 2,000 such cases documented across hospitals in detail. Of course, there are many more which are not documented. But I'm giving you one example, and it's well documented. The person was on terminal cancer, where the cancer was full in the body, everywhere. Had barely a few days to live. That night, the person has a near-death experience. Actually, it's not a near-death, it's a spiritual experience. She found herself coming out of the body, entering the whole experience of the spiritual domain, and receiving and embracing divine love, in which she was so fulfilled. And then she wakes up from that sleep, from that dream experience, gets up, totally healed. The day before she had had tests for her cancer. The next day she has tests and all the cancer is gone in the entire body. Biologically, there is no explanation, but it's recorded because they had all their x-rays and other tests before and after. In a single day, overnight, everything had gone. Well, this can happen every day if we open. Except we can't, we don't know, we don't want to, whatever it is. But to the extent we are able to open and receive, that miraculous intervention is equally possible because it is Atman. The freedom of the self is the greatest freedom. It can override everything because everything is power of self, expression of self, including matter, isn't it? This is how you have the stories of yogis who are able to heal with a single touch or gaze, or sometimes a letter is sent and the person receives the healing. We have so many stories of these in the action of the mother and Sri Aurobindo's on the disciples. But this is the rationale behind it. And these are medically confirmed cases. They are called just spontaneous remission. That's the name given in science because they say we don't know why, it just happens. Because they don't know why, because they only see the biology. They do not see the higher ranges and the other bodies that we have. They do not understand the full scope of the roots of illness as well as the means of healing. So this was a big picture first introduction to this very fascinating and complex theme. And I can take any questions if you have any.
Sir, like you gave the example of that person who was expert in martial arts, that even the sword could not cut his hand. So sir, what he did was he regulated his prana. So, sir, how can we concentrate our prana wherever we want?
Your obvious answer to your question will be the experience you had. What you did with your palm, did you experience that warmth? Yes. You just concentrated your mind's attention, your prana flowed. So the key is here, mind directs prana. Your awareness guides the flow of prana. Left to itself, prana follows its rhythm and habit. That's how your body runs. Your breathing is automatic, right? You may be asleep, but your body is breathing. Your heart is beating. But the moment you choose to be conscious, you can hold your breath. How do you do it? By becoming conscious of the movement, stopping it, or consciously expanding or reducing, right? Inhaling, exhaling. This is your key. Mind directs prana, directs body. So in fact, your breathing is the only function, we may say, in the body, which is at the same time automatic as well as conscious. So if you do nothing, it goes back to automatic breathing. If you become conscious, you can consciously speed it, slow down, hold, etc. You can't do that to the heart. You're not conscious of your heart. You can't slow it or speed it up, right? But you can do with your breath. So breath is considered in the biology the function which bridges your conscious and the subconscious. And that's the reason why breath is given so much importance in certain practices. I'll give one example of how you can use the breath. Your mind is clouded, confused, agitated, you're upset, you're angry, you're tense, you have an exam, you're in high stress. You can't think, right? So the key is this, breath. Take a slow, deep breath. And then breathe out slow and deep. Immediately you feel your mind becoming calm, your emotions becoming calm. Do this 3 times, 4 times. You'll find your emotions become quiet, your mind becomes clear. That's your key for access to inner subconscious functions. But once you're able to do this consciously, you don't need to use the breath anymore. Now I can say, okay, relax your emotions, and you relax your emotions. I'll say, quiet your thought, your mind becomes quiet, because you've become conscious of it now. Okay, so breathing is your entry point. It's the key to the gate. But once you have access, you don't need the key anymore. You can freely become conscious and directly change. And thus acquire total mastery over your mind as well as your life energies, and eventually, therefore, your body.
Thank you. Thank you, Sraddhalu ji. Smita Jindal ji has a question.
Very little time.
Yeah, you were saying that parents are nourishing you with their love and affection, even though they might not be. So does it also mean for parents who've passed on, can they also still nourish you, even if they're not in the physical world?
Yes. Yes, it is possible, because one of the implications of what we discussed, the 3 bodies, is that they also represent 3 levels of reality. Just as in the gross physical world, your body collides against a physical object because they're of the same density. Similarly, in the pranamaya kosha, the pranamaya material collides with pranamaya material because they're of the same grade. And similarly, in the manomaya, in the domain of mind, you have actually objects, thought forms, which can collide and interact. So basically, this describes 3 broad levels of reality experience, which are, of course, interconnected on some level, but still there are 3 very distinct kinds of experience. So when you enter a state of dream, for example, you are going out of your gross physical body, entering into a subtle body, which is formed of your manomaya and pranamaya. And you experience things there. Now, one of the things you experience there is wherever you think, you go. So if you think of somebody, you are there. You think of a place and instantly you're there. Because in the domain of energy and mind, distance breaks down. Now, there are fascinating experiences you have in the dream. For example, you can experience intense emotion in the dream, and then when you wake up, you'll find the emotion dulls down, because your subtle body is able to experience far greater intensities than the physical body. Now, all this is to say that things of that domain are independent from this. So when a person leaves the body, what we call death is nothing but a shedding of the physical layer only. Your Annamaya is dropped, it shut down, the Pranamaya withdraws. You are in the Manomaya Pranamaya combination, and subsequently you go to whatever level of your current evolution is. But in that subtle body, you can move around. So at first you're in a domain which is physical, you can see things of the physical world, you can see other people, though they can't see you. But later you withdraw to still finer levels where you may not directly see things of the physical world. But still in your mind, you can feel a connection with things of the world. So for example, you are far away from your child, let's say, or some relative of yours. When you make a call with a video call, during the video call, you will feel as if the person is right there with you. Emotionally, you will feel the connection. All that you needed for that was the picture of the person, a live picture. Now, suppose your video call drops, the video link breaks, but you have only the audio remaining. It doesn't remove the experience. You can still feel the same. Now, suppose you drop the audio and only hold the heart connection. You'll still feel the same intensity, except we don't have a focus for the mind. Our mind begins to drift, so we lose the link. We need the picture and the sound to be able to hold attention. Okay, so key is this. If you hold attention, the link is formed. You turn away attention, the link is broken. Now, once you get this idea, very simple, the corollary is very simple. I can be sitting in my home with no video audio connection, think of somebody and feel with affection, and the link is formed, and the love, nourishment can go and help the person. This is how people help, especially from a spiritual help. So there would be, this is how they would do. People would send a telegram. In those days, you didn't have audio video connections also. So someone would send a telegram, so-and-so is sick, please help. And the telegram would be taken to the mother. And the only thing told to the mother is the name of the person, so-and-so from this city. And in the moment when the information was given to the mother, we would find that the patient began to get better. What happened in her consciousness, the fact that that link is made of consciousness, immediately the help is sent and the healing begins. Okay, this is very important to realize. When you think of somebody with affection, there is a link and something is sent. If you're skilled, you can send a high intensity of energy or affection, or even a spiritual help when you have that access, which can produce that miraculous result. Now, in all this description, your biological state is not important. You could be out of the physical body, in the subtle worlds, having shed your physical body, and the same truth would apply. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. A parent who has left the physical body can still continue to nourish and support the child if she chooses. At some point, she may say, yes, now I have done my part. My child is independent enough, does not need that support, or there are others who are looking after, and he or she may choose to turn away and go into a state of rest. That's a choice. But independent of circumstances, that help can be there constantly.
Thank you.
Sir, Yashwardhan Singh has asked a question. How do we give up our ego? Because if we want to transform a bitter relationship, first we have to give up our ego. How do we give up our ego?
Well, actually, if you had the time, I would ask you, what do you mean by give up the ego? And who says you have to give up ego to have a transformed relationship? That's an idea you've picked up from somewhere. Let me tell you something here about the ego. Your ego is a very precious thing. Don't be in a hurry to give it up. Okay, it might sound contrary to what you've been told by many spiritual teachers, but that's because the word is misused or misunderstood. Okay, let me explain this first. What is ego? The sense of I am different from others. Now, if you didn't have the sense of I am different from others, how would you care for yourself? How would you work on yourself? How would you make effort for your own growth? And others are not going to make effort for your growth. You have to make effort for your growth, right? So ego is a very necessary development in our evolution. If you do not have an ego, then you cannot really be an individual. You would just be a part of a mass, which is an automatic machine. You see, I'll give an example here. Perhaps if you look at ants in an ant hive, every ant, perhaps some minor individuality, but they're willing to sacrifice themselves for the rest, isn't it? Because they don't have a very clear sense of I need to survive, I need to be separate. That's not very strongly formed. But as the animals evolve, the individualization becomes more, and I sometimes becomes more important than others. And it's a necessary step. As that ego sense forms, it can form in a healthy step, in a healthy way. I develop my capacities, and then I put my capacities to service of others, to help others. That's a healthy ego. An unhealthy ego is one which is obsessed with itself. I don't care. If you don't care for me, I don't care for you. That's unhealthy. So recognize growth of ego is necessary for you. It's the sense of separation of I, but it has a healthy growth when the I grows in order to be able to serve others, society, or a higher ideal. That's a healthy growth of ego. So don't be in a hurry to give up your ego. What will happen is, as you become conscious of your own higher parts and the sense and the presence of the soul, of your soul as you, the true person who took birth, and that sense begins to grow, the surface, superficial form of the ego will give way for the true individual, which is the soul, which will take its place. And that's what is meant by giving up the ego to the divine consciousness, etc. But that comes later. That happens when you begin to experience the divine presence and you feel such a wonderful experience. You say, oh, this is so beautiful. I want to give myself to that because that is so much more filling. And it'll happen spontaneously. Till then, let your ego grow in a healthy way. What is bad is egoism, is the obsession with yourself, where you become the center of the world. That's an aberration. That is a falsehood. But to experience separateness so that you may grow is a healthy thing. Okay. So in your relationship, when you want to transform a bitter relationship into a sweet one, it's not by giving up ego, but by giving up egoism, the self-obsession, in which you may make adjustments. You can say, okay, I need to do this, and we have a mutually convenient arrangement, but you can't do that if you don't have an ego, isn't it? So the ego is a good thing. In a healthy relationship, you will relate to others in a healthy way, which is mutually nurturing and nourishing.
Yes, Sri Aurobindo has said the ego is the helper and the ego is the bar.
Aditya Mishra has a question. He wants Shraddhaluji to once again explain spontaneous remissions.
Okay. Well, I don't think we have an explanation from a biological point of view. Medical science simply says, it's a label. When they put a label, they say we don't know. That's what it just happens. Spontaneous, meaning we don't know. Remission is total cure. Why it happens from a spiritual point of view is because the freedom of the higher consciousness of the self. Remember, the higher up you go in the levels of consciousness, the greater the freedom, because the higher forms the lower. Mind directs energies. Energies direct biology. Okay, so what is it above mind which directs mind? That is the adhyatmic. So I'm again generalizing because there are many layers above mind. At the moment, let's just say there is one overall spiritual consciousness. What is its characteristic? It is consciousness of oneness. There is no division. See, in your mind, you can have one viewpoint colliding with another viewpoint. We think differently. And if we come face to face, we have a collision of viewpoints. Or in emotions, we have different attachments, attractions, desires, which are conflicting. Or in the body, two objects collide because they can't take the same space. But when you enter the domain of the higher spiritual ranges, things are one fundamentally. They can express in different aspects, but they're always one in essence. So you actually have a viewpoint in which you can see all viewpoints as aspects of one grand vision. And so from that state of consciousness, you will realize everybody's viewpoint has validity. It's a way of looking at things. And my viewpoint is most complete when I can see from every viewpoint and the justification for each. And then I can understand why they say like this, why the other person says like that. And I can find also the harmonization of all viewpoints. So that's the nature of this higher consciousness, of what we will call the spiritual generally. So when it enters the mind, it can take two conflicting ideas and find their harmony. It enters the domain of life energies, takes two different very pulls and pushes of your energies and finds the right alignment between them. It enters the biology and finds the division and their healing. So when that action flows down from above, as it penetrates all these layers, it brings harmony into all these parts and completes the healing. That's the rationale of the spontaneous remission. The method is to be able to consciously open and invoke that action, and then to receive, and then to hold. See the formula which I described earlier, you call, first aspire or pray or call, open, receive, and hold. The higher the source, the more complete the spontaneous remission.
Thank you so much. Your explanations are so scientific and the way they flow. So that is why we have these kinds of questions. So Yuvakshi Rastogi, very interesting, and I'm sure this must be a question of many others as well. Most times following our Swadharma means disappointing someone else's definition of Swadharma. Now, if these people start disliking us because of a different point of view, what are we supposed to do? Introspect and improve our opinion, or stand our ground? And how to keep an attitude of love around such people? So 3 things: introspect and improve our opinion, or stand our ground, and then how to develop an attitude of love around such people.
You know, in your question, you have said someone else's definition of Swadharma, and you have to be clear what is meant by that. Swadharma is the recognition of your deepest, highest, let's say, essential being. Dharma itself, if you look at it in this way, is that which makes you you, uniquely you, specially you. A dog's dharma, Swadharma, is to run on 4 feet. If it tries to walk on 2 feet, you can train it to do, and in the circus dogs, they do that. But after a point, their biology can't sustain it anymore, right? The Swadharma of the human being, of course, I'm now generalizing at the level of humanity as a whole. The Swadharma of the human being is the power of thought which leads our life. Okay? That's what distinguishes us from animals. Now, each individual has a different priority of that particular form of thought or self-fulfillment, and it may vary. And often it is tied to the particular form in which you have taken birth. And the particular skills and activities which give you deepest satisfaction are often a pointer to what is your deepest Swadharma. You have also multiple dharmas. You can say, I have a dharma as a child to my parents. I have a dharma as a parent to my children. I have a dharma as a member of society, and they all may collide. And that's why you have to go behind these superficial ones to something more deep, in which you will find the harmony of all these. As you begin to see or become conscious, introspect deeper and deeper, you will find things which you can't describe in words, but you just know. I know that I have to grow in this way. And you start following. And by following, you find a deep satisfaction and a deep enthusiasm which flows, and a flowering of your skills which happens. Then you know you're on the right track. Somebody else can say, looking at you, yes, but you're so good at playing musical instruments, you should take that as a career because you're good at it. But your soul may have worked on that in the previous life. I did my musical skills then. I carry something of that skill today, but that's not why I came for. In this life, I want to develop my rational skills. And so I have greater satisfaction in pursuing that rational line. Although my music stays with me, I still enjoy it. But I won't make that my primary drive, because it's not. But the parent who says, oh, that's how you will earn money, that's how you'll get a better career, that's how you'll become famous, is looking at it very superficially and in even a wrong way. Now you may say, I don't know what I want to do. Then I follow blindly what I'm told to do. That's your choice. But if you say, I don't know, that's because you've not bothered to look inside yourself. Because deep inside you already know, because you already are what you are, isn't it? You don't have to know it here. You have to know it there. But where is it? It's deep inside, behind many layers of what? Habits. Because all your life you have tried to live up to some fake ideals. I must be good which means what? I must get up every morning, smile at people, say good morning to XYZ. And you created this appearance, which you're trying to live up to, hoping that you'll get praise and appreciation, when inside you're saying, I'm so fed up with it. Right? So let go of these superficial appearances. Maybe they have their place in society, but they are not you. What is you? And when you introspect and you find your deepest truth, you may come back to something very interesting. You may say, you know, I am a happy person inside. I want to be happy and I want to spread happiness. And so when I look at somebody, I say, hi, how are you? So nice to see you. Now it's coming from who you are, not from a pretentious social appearance. You see the difference? You flow being what you are. And perhaps the social training was useful. Perhaps it's not. Perhaps it was just a screen that clouded you. But now you begin to act from your deepest truth. And in the process, you might have to go through some experimentation. Maybe the journey of your life will be meandering like the river. First, you'll develop this skill, then focus on that, and then focus on the other, and that's fine. Not everybody goes in a straight line because we often have multiple sides we need to satisfy. So the only judge finally of what is your deepest Swadharma can be you, not somebody else. Of course, somebody who has a deeper insight may be able to see into you, but that already requires for them to be of a certain development and maturity of depth, which you will sense in them. When they say that, you will say, ah, yes, the moment you said it, it resonated with me because it was true. So ultimately, while you may obey people up to a point, you will have to introspect to find the deeper reality of who you are and why you're here. And trust that you will be guided. Even if you make a mistake, even if your first recognition is a superficial one, as you start doing the things, you will feel, this feels right. No, something is wrong. And you make course corrections. Trust that you will be guided because that's the deepest truth of who you are. You cannot go wrong, ultimately.
Archana Mishra ma'am, she wishes to know how to develop our intuitive skills.
I'm going to suggest for you to read from Sri Aurobindo. And there's a chapter in this fat book called The Synthesis of Yoga. There's a chapter called Intuitive Mind. There he describes 4 steps or 4 exercises. So perhaps you will find the language a little difficult, or maybe you'll find it simple enough. Don't worry. Just read. The only thing you may have is he uses certain words which he has earlier used and defined, and they may be new to you because you're reading in the middle of a chapter. But still, I'm going to suggest for you to read. And he describes 4 practices which you do, which I'll quickly summarize. First, the capacity to silence your mind at will for as long as you need to. If you cannot silence your mind, you cannot access the ranges above. First practice. Second practice is to be able to deepen your awareness inward, to become conscious of these things which happen at layers within, of which you are normally not aware because you're turned outward. So that inward turn, trying to go as deep as you can. And there you'll find a certain kind of a spontaneous knowing. You look at a situation, somebody makes a statement and something inside you feels, something is not okay. He's exaggerating. You will spontaneously feel that, but you won't know what is wrong. Third, shifting the center of thought from your mind to above head. Because here you have the access, the center which I spoke of, there's a higher center. You have access to the intuitive consciousness. From there, when you know, you also, I know exactly what he's lying. He's exaggerating on this point. This is how it happened. You will know completely from there. And then the 4th method is to develop all the faculties, intensify all the faculties of your mind, including your memory, including your analytics, synthetic powers, and imaginative powers. Raise them to their highest until they cross the threshold borderline of your intellect and open to the intuition above. And there's an intuitional imagination, intuitional rationality, intuitional insight, etc., all of which begin to now connect and amplify your mental powers. And this is how you'll awaken your genius potential. Let me tell you something very important. Genius is not inborn. Genius lives in all of us in our higher ranges. Opening to the higher range is your genius. If you can consciously practice even the first 2 or 3 of these practices, you'll find automatically the faculties of genius, which are already within you at this higher level, will begin to, so to say, flow in, plug in, and fill your thinking powers of mind and amplify them and bring into them this higher capacity. Someday, if we have a chance, maybe not at this stage in your life, but someday we can even create a kind of a training program for opening to your genius potential and developing your intuitive powers, because it's actually as practical as the practices you do for developing the power of your intellect.
What sir has said has really appealed to me, very, very deeply, because ma'am, it has eventually answered many of my questions, those questions which I'm not able to, define in words, which are, just within me, but I'm, finding out answers in every talk or everything that I'm reading. And ma'am, it's amazing. And whatever I have listened today is really, really amazing, ma'am, because, we are students on reading our, physics, chemistry, biology. Ma'am, it's somewhere, ma'am, it always, ma'am, clicked to me, ki kuch to hoga, which will connect to me through this also. Ma'am, because ma'am, everything that I'm doing, ma'am, I'm trying to, be with it, be with that tattva every time. So ma'am, I always, ma'am, ma'am, because my mama and also ma'am, they also used to say कि सब कुछ तुमको spirituality के तरफ ले जाएगा. Every will lead to you towards spirituality. So ma'am, this talk has, from a perspective, has led to me towards spirituality again through studies which I was finding. And really, from my folded hands, I want you to guide me to have this experience within me. So these things I've been listening to, many times, but I want it to happen. Now it's time I want it to happen within me, because man mein, buddhi mein to ho chuka hai. Now I want it to happen within, which is really in my experience. And I'm really, grateful to Anjali ma'am, Promini ma'am, and especially to you, sir, that for giving me this opportunity to be here. Really very, very thankful, and especially to, the divine himself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pranali. I appreciate what you've said, and I agree entirely that everything in the universe, without exception, has its origin in the divine source, and therefore expresses some aspect of it, and therefore can become a gateway also to perceive the divine. Everything without exception. So even, obviously for us, the starting points are things which have beauty, which evoke wonder, things which open us to greater knowledge or greater capacities. Those are our entry points, most natural. But eventually you will see even that which appears to you contrary at first teaches you something which opens to an aspect of the divine. And if nothing else, let's say something which is extremely negative or harsh, we even will use the word asuric. What is the character of the asura? Great strength, great power. Of course, without wisdom or without love. But the training of how power can be used or misused also is given by that experience, by that perception. So that's why in the Sri Krishna's revelation of his completeness, his cosmic personality, Arjuna sees equally the devas and the asuras as also aspects or powers of his action in the universe. So there's nothing in the universe which does not have something profound to teach, but also to open you as a gateway to some perception of the divine possibilities. And within you, and this is the point, is the impact of all these. It's as if the whole universe with infinite possibility concentrates itself on you, the individual. And within you, all those possibilities exist. Everything that exists out there in the universe has its equivalent, if nothing else, as a vibration, as an energy, as an idea, as a seed within you. So you are in some sense the miniature universe flowering to the full potential in your own way, in your own unique line and swadharma. But with each thing out there, there's a corresponding power within you. If not for it, you couldn't see that which is out there. But because it is within you, you can see it out there, and you can also manifest it in that way which is unique to you. And this is how we have to see our life's journey. everything that comes your way. You can see it as something which can be used to help in your growth. And your flowering potential is infinite, as is the universe infinite. That's what makes this life so wonderful. Each one uniquely approaching the infinite in our own way and unfolding our infinite potential. Always each step with a joy, because that's the nature of this reality, Ananda. So every self-discovery, every self-actualization is accompanied by deep joy. So the journey of life is a journey of infinite self-discovery in infinite possibility of joy. Okay, keep this as your ideal, and we'll close with this idea. Namaste. Thank you to all of you.